Hi there, everybody. It's Cameron Morrissey coming to you live. We are doing our first ever book discussion here in Mentor Minutes, and I am thrilled to have our first book be one of my personal favorites, Peaks and Valleys by Spencer Johnson. I came across this a number of years ago, and it really helped out not only in my career, in my business life, but in my personal life as well. So for these book discussions, we're going to be doing one every single week. Next week, it's Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, a great one and one of the best books that's come out recently in regards to management and leadership. And we'll usually have a little bit of a structure to it, but Peaks and Valleys, as you can see, is awfully tiny. It's about 99 pages, really only takes about an hour, hour and a half to read. If you haven't read it, definitely tune into this discussion. There's lots of good stuff in it, but pick it up. It is worth the read. It's absolutely wonderful. Good seeing everybody on here. So in today's session, I'm just going to actually go through the book and get my kind of highlighted, underlined pieces that made me think, and we'll just kind of discuss it from there. Usually books have a hierarchy on what they're discussing, but I think this book is actually so rich in the story that it weaves that it is worthwhile for us to just kind of take it as we go. So truthfully, I think we're probably going to be here for close to an hour. We'll see. I don't know how these things go, but there is a lot in this book. The book is a story of a young man who is in a valley. Call it the beginning part of his career. And at a certain point, he reaches a stage of discontent or curiosity as to what's out there. And he goes and he climbs the peak. And he finds this wise old man who starts imparting wisdom to him that he can take back down. And so that's kind of the story that's weaved. It's very easy read, very simple read, but as you'll see, there is a lot to this. And so as you pop along with questions or comments, if you've read the book and you've got some things to discuss, absolutely drop down into the comments section. I want this to be kind of a discussion-oriented session with us here. But with that said, I'm going to dive in to kind of my first highlighted part of Peaks and Valleys. And it was right off the bat, right in the beginning, the young man is in the valley going through his career. And what he found, what I have underlined here, is he began to see what was wrong more often than he noticed what was right. And I think that's a great place to start off, and it's a great place for everybody out there to reflect. When you start seeing more of what's wrong in a particular situation in your workplace, then it might be time for a change. It might be time for you to look elsewhere. It might be time for you to look for a new challenge, perhaps within the job. You don't have to leave an organization. You can look for a challenge within the organization. But I know over the course of my career, I saw this all the time. Back when I was an hourly employee, I remember everybody bitching and complaining, for lack of a better word, about everything that's going on, how crummy the job is. And I'm sitting there going, A, the job's great. B, if you're that unhappy about it, then move on. Do something. So many people get stuck in this metaphorical valley and they never look to get themselves out, or they just look for a plateau, which comes along a little bit later. The next comment I have on here is actually page 9. If you're following along in the book, great. Otherwise, like I say, I'll read it and give the context as we go with this one, just because the book, again, is so rich with practical advice. I'm just going to kind of take it through since it's so short. But the more that he compared the peak to his valley, the worse he felt. And this gets to comparison, which will be touched on a little bit later in the book as well. Too often we are looking around. Crystal, so good to see you here for this episode. So many times we are looking around to other individuals, to even other departments. That's another great one within organizations. And we are comparing ourselves to them. In this case, you're comparing yourself to the peak, where you think you could be, all of that potential. And when you draw that comparison to where you're at, you find that you get unhappy. You actually end up sowing the seeds of more discontent and more unhappiness. Comparison is something to be very mindful of. I want to say, and I've called it before, the thief of joy is comparing, because there's always somebody out there who has it better than you. Unless you're Jeff Bezos and you have $150 billion, there's more money that you can attain. And he would probably say there's somebody who's doing more in rocketry or with their business that's more exciting. So there's always comparisons that you can draw. Good to see everybody. Mary, Joe Gass, good to see you on here as well. So there's always more comparisons to draw, and be mindful of that. again, when you're drawing comparisons more within your job, that might be a time where you need to start looking for ways to get out, to change things, to mix things up just a little bit. Now, this young man considers making that change. And this is something that everybody is going to be very familiar with. Looking to make that change, looking to go out to that peak, looking to see what is out there. And what happens when he talks about it to his friends and loved ones and family? They all discouraged him from going where they themselves had never been. I draw back to my experience again in that line level position where everybody is discontented. Graham, good to see you here. Everybody is discontented with their work, but they're not doing anything to change their job. And so what you have is you have a whole bunch of people that aren't interested to a certain extent in you showing them what they should be doing, that they know in their heart they should be doing. And so what you want to do is when you are considering going to a peak, what I would look to do when you're looking to make a change in your career, look at the individuals who have left your organization in the last year. See if you can reach out to them, whether it's through LinkedIn, if you're friends on Facebook. Reach out to those people who have left your organization and ask them whether they feel it was a good move or not. That's a great way to get a fresh perspective. Most people within the organization aren't going to want you to move on because that is just highlighting how they are ineffective in moving on themselves. Trista, good to see you here from Virginia, other side of the continent here. So you want to reach out to other individuals and try to find ways to see how things are working out. Whether the grass really was greener on the other side, whether they regret those decisions. There's an example that's used, and it's a way out there sort of example from Grant Cardone, who says, everybody who I talked to about buying a jet, again, way out there, said don't do it. It's a waste of money. But those were all people that didn't own a jet. Everybody who had owned a jet said it was the best investment that they made. And so you need that balance. So look for people who have gone to the peak before, who have made the change in their career. That's something that can be huge as far as getting a fresh perspective and the real perspective that you need to be taking on this. Sometimes the Marine Corps boot camp mind is so much change, but so exciting. Ready to take this leap. And Crystal, that's absolutely fantastic. I'm so glad. I know you and I have chit-chatted on here for years, and I'm thrilled for all the progress that's being made in your personal life and your professional life. The next comment, it kind of tunes in as the young man is going from the valley to the peak. And this is the first time I've ever keyed on. I've read this book many, many times. Again, a personal favorite of mine, has helped me out a lot personally and professionally. And I hadn't tuned in on this, but as the young man went higher, the cool breeze and fresh air revitalized him. From higher up, his valley looked smaller. And what that really means to me is once you start going through a change, once you set yourself on a goal, a difficult goal, but a meaningful goal, and you start working towards it, what happens is initially it's hard because you're just adding more work, you're adding more stress to your day in, day out life. But what happens is as you go along in the journey, you see this a lot with working out, going to the gym. Initially, those first 2 weeks, it's painful, literally, as you're sore. But then as you start going more and more, you get a little bit of a lift. It gets a little easier. You get a new perspective on things. And so I think that's something to look forward to as you think about all the work, because that's one of the things people don't want, that fear of the unknown, the work that they're going to have to put in. But realize that part of the work, and I'll get to another aspect of this later, part of this work, there will be those rests and there will be those moments of joy and fulfillment as you make changes and as you look to make improvements in your life and in your career. Next thing I have is as he actually gets to the peak, and he's disappointed because he wanted to get there in time for the sunset. So he finally gets to this peak. It was an arduous journey, gets to the peak, and he goes, oh man, I missed it. And so then, he's bummed out. He got to his goal, but he's bummed out for whatever reason. And the old man actually points him, because the sun's gone down now, he points him up to look at the stars. And the stars, if you've ever been on a mountain peak or up in the mountains at night, it is stunning how many stars are out there. And so the young man the old man comments, they were there all the time. You just needed to change what you were looking at. And that's when I just came back from a few weeks away, a vacation. And that's one thing that it always affords me, is the opportunity to look at things different. There are opportunities. You may say that you don't have opportunities in your current position, in your current stage in life, in your current stage in your career. But if you change your perspective and you look around, not just keep focused on the one thing that you've been focused on, moving and getting that promotion, for instance. If you look around, there's almost always opportunities. There's almost always successes. I talk about that a lot. We look for the problems. A young man got to his peak, and instead of celebrating that he made it to the end of his journey, he was depressed because of the one thing that didn't go right, and that is he didn't get there on time to be able to see the sunset. And so don't always focus on the negative. Look for those opportunities to see the positive in what is going on. In any situation, whether it is reaching the end of the goal or whether it's being stuck in the valley, look for those opportunities to recognize success, recognize joy, and recognize the good things that have been going on in your journey. Next comment is the old man is talking about the wisdom that he has. It turns out that the young man is on the peak with the most successful man in the world. Money, fame, success, happiness, all of those things. And so the man offers to share his wisdom with the young man, with one caveat, and that is that if he finds it valuable, that he is going to share that wisdom with others. And this is an important aspect, certainly for me. I hate to call it wisdom, but I like to share my wisdom with everybody out there and try to make some sort of impact on people's lives and careers for the better. That's my purpose. So this definitely impacts me. But the practical aspect of sharing your knowledge with those around you and seeking for others to be better, to be happier, to be more fulfilled, you get a benefit out of it. And they actually call it out right here. When people around you know how to make both good and bad times work for them, they worry less and they do better. And that makes working and living with them more enjoyable for you. So I want to talk about your responsibility to your coworkers, all right? Helping your coworkers out, helping augment their skill sets, helping to try to show them a way around, helping to pick them up when they're down, makes your life better because you have more well-adjusted people around you who support you because they will reciprocate that support, and it makes it more fun for you to work in your job and be supportive to those around you. Share your knowledge. Seek knowledge from others, absolutely, but look to share that knowledge. Now, the next page, and I'm on 16 for anybody who's following along, and for those that have tuned in late and are wondering what the heck we're talking about, I'm doing my first ever book discussion. We'll be doing these weekly, and today we're talking about Peaks and Valleys by Spencer Johnson, a quick 99-page read. You can get through in about an hour and a half, but there's just a ton of great wisdom for you to use for your career and for your life in this. And we have the first call out here, and it is natural for everyone, everywhere, to have peaks and valleys at work and in life. And it's important, I almost take it as a given that this is the case, but it's important to call it out. Because when you find yourself in a valley, when you find yourself not meeting your own expectations, it can feel like everything is against you and that you are doing something wrong. And what I will tell you, and what this book tells you, and what almost anybody will tell you, is everybody goes through those peaks and valleys. There are people who are wildly successful, who you think in your job are wildly successful, or who you see out there who are wildly successful, who have certain aspects of their life that is absolutely horrible. And they don't feel like a success. They may show it on the outside, they may look like it, but truthfully, they are actually in a valley. Everybody goes through that, and that's one of the big messages in this book, is your life and your career is gonna do this. It's gonna have peaks and it's gonna have valleys constantly. Be aware that that's going to happen. Hopefully they're short as far as the valleys, and hopefully they're long and they're high as far as the peaks are. But it is a reality that that is something that's going to take place in your life and in your career. The other call out on this is that peaks and valleys are not just the good and bad times that happen to you. They're not the external circumstances. They are also how you feel inside and respond to outside events. So there will be times, and it's easiest to show this with successes. So the young man in this story reached his peak, and he says, "Oh, I missed it." He looked for the bad. He felt bad when he reached his goal. How crazy is that? But we see that all of the time. We have one thing that happens to go wrong, and everything else that's going right in our life just gets diminished and set aside. It's about how you feel. And so a lot of people will take the successes and the good times that they have, and they will focus, and I'm as guilty of this as anybody else, and you'll focus on what you don't have and what you haven't accomplished yet. And you'll get hyper-focused on that. In our careers, those are the problems. So we just had record sales last quarter, let's say. But you're focused on the individuals who actually decreased their performance, or the fact that the customer service numbers didn't set a brand new record. And so you're focused on that instead of what is going on that's good in your life. Now, the flip side of that, and I use the successes to show that because that's what most everybody can recognize and can see that they're guilty of, is when they're reaching their goals and when they're having high success, they're still kind of dissatisfied. And that's that feeling. And that's why I say the peaks and valleys aren't necessarily the goals themselves, it's how you feel. But the same thing happens in the valleys. There are people, when you can look forward to going through those bad times because you know you're going to get some valuable lessons and some wisdom that's going to help you reach higher peaks down the road, and this is something that gets touched on here a little bit later, those valleys, you can also look at those as challenges. I was just speaking to a coaching client yesterday, and she got a new promotion a couple of months ago, so she's fresh on a brand new job, and it's a really crazy environment that she's in. There's political aspects that are going on with it, there's legal aspects that are going on, and she used the word crisis to explain one particular thing that was going on. It was a report that got leaked out and shouldn't have, and it was the prior person who held her position that actually okayed it to go out without her approval. So she called it a crisis. And I told her to rephrase that. So that might be a valley. You've got this crisis. You've got this report that got leaked out before it should have. But I looked at that as an opportunity. All right, yeah, it's a problem. It's an issue. But it was nothing that you did. And so what it is it's an opportunity, new in the position, to be able to show how it is that you're going to lead. All eyes are on you in this crisis, shall we say, but it's an opportunity for you to show everybody what you are as a leader, what you bring to the table, your integrity, how you deal with difficult situations. And I told her, it's a freebie. This isn't actually your fault. And you're not going to throw the other person under the bus. She's not going to do that. But this is one where you can freely express it. So we're looking to turn that crisis, that valley, and change the feelings around. Doesn't mean that external circumstances, you aren't in a valley. That report shouldn't have been leaked. But you can find the good within that valley. And again, that gets talked about here too. The key is to separate what happens to you from how good and valuable you feel you are as a person. And I'm going to say that again because it's really important. The key in so much of life and so much of your career is to separate what happens to you from how good and valuable you feel you are as a person. When you are confident, again, this is something I talked about her with in regards to something else, and that is when you are confident that you are making the right decisions for the right reasons, that you're tied to the goals of the organization, that you are balancing all of the interests, and you are making the best decision for the organization as a whole, that is an extraordinarily freeing aspect of things, and it allows you to confidently move forward. In the latter stages of my career, I would be happy to take the initiative on a number of things that were kind of in that gray area of my empowerment. And the reason I was okay with that was because I was firm that I was making the correct decision and I knew why I was making that decision. And that's something that can really be freeing for you, help you get through those tough times and help you move further and faster in your career because you're able to confidently get in touch with what is important. And now that requires homework. You need to know what is important to the organization, who the stakeholders are, and that you're balancing all of those interests and what you intend to get out of a particular decision. But I like mentioning that as kind of a side note in the story, actually. Next comment I have on here is, who is to say where the highest part of the valley ends and the lowest part of the peak begins? And what we're talking about in this particular case is, you don't necessarily know at any particular moment whether you are rising out of the valley or whether you're coming down off of a peak. You see this all the time. Again, I'll talk success because that's where people see it all the time. You see companies that are cruising along and then they start making a mistake and they don't notice that they are coming down. Likewise, there's those tough times where you're getting through and all of a sudden you look around and go, oh, wait a second, it's all better now because you kept taking those steady things. It is a continuum. It is not particular moments in time, shall we say. Those moments are just moments, but it is a continuum and you can be moving up or down into your peaks or your valleys depending on what your actions are. The error that people make, the errors you make in today's good times create tomorrow's bad times. And the wise things you do in today's bad times create tomorrow's good times. This right here is the heart of this book, and this is what I've taken with me. The peaks and the valleys are connected. What you do when you are in your personal valley, and there's people out there right now who are going to be watching this and you are in a valley, what you do right now determines how deep that valley goes and how long you stay there. I'll say that again. What you do when you find yourself in a valley in your career, in a valley in your life, what you do in those moments determines how deep that valley goes and how long you stay there. The flip side of that is when you are successful. What you do when you are successful determines how long you stay successful. What happens is people get complacent when they get successful. They don't challenge themselves. They're not learning. They're not doing those things that got them successful in the first place, and so that success decreases. What happens when you are in a valley, when you're going through those tough times? Sometimes you just wallow in that. You don't do anything, and so you stay there. I'm reminded, this reminds me of one of my favorite Winston Churchill quotes, and there's a ton of great Winston Churchill quotes, but one of my favorite ones is, if you find yourself going through hell, don't stop, keep going. And that just means, if you're going through hell, don't stop, don't stay there, don't wallow. Change, keep going. That's how you're going to get through it to the other side of hell. And so that's kind of the principle with this book, is what you do in the good and bad times determines how long those times stay the way that they are. And yeah, I'll keep moving along here. The crux of this is, and what the boy realizes as he's talking to the old wise man is, so we actually create our own good and bad times far more than we realize. And that's absolutely true. You create the successes far more than you realize. You have a hand in your defeats and your valleys in life and in your career more than you give yourself credit for. The other side of this is how you react, how you feel in those particular times has a lot to do with it as well. And that you can create a valley. You can feel like you're in a valley when you're on a peak, when you've been successful. And a lot of us have been there before, where we're successful, but we don't feel fulfilled for whatever reason that is. And we need to kind of change that perspective around. But you have an enormous say in how you react to the valleys and the peaks that you're in, and how long you stay in each one of those instances. And so the old man, they're continuing their conversation. The old man says, and I don't always get to stay here. I have to go into the valley to get supplies and find what I need to live here. So the old man lives in a house that's on this peak. But what he's acknowledging here is even the most successful people have those downtimes, and in fact need those downtimes to learn the lessons and to get the supplies that they need to get back on that peak and to stay there. So staying there inevitably isn't going to happen. This book is not about getting to your peak and staying there indefinitely. That's not what is being talked about here, because the reality, as we said right from the outset, is you're going to keep going through these peaks and through these valleys. And so you want to recognize that right away, that that's going to happen. I know that I'm going to have tough times coming up personally and professionally. And I guarantee every single one of you out there is going to have tough times personally and professionally. The secret, they go on to say, is to truly appreciate and enjoy each time for what it is while you are living it. I almost want to say this starts getting into some sort of like Buddhist teaching or something like that. But truly try to enjoy it. When you have the right perspective, Esther, it's so good to see you here as well. And I see, you've got it right there. Fantastic. I'm on page 23, by the way. What you see from this kind of philosophy of peaks and valleys is that there is value. Brianna, good to see you here as well. There is value in going through the tough times. You will learn lessons. You will get a different perspective on things. You will learn skills and be forced to learn skills and forced to take actions that can benefit you and get you on the next peak that you might be heading towards. Cindy, good to see you here, and I'm glad you like it as well. Definitely, if anybody who hasn't picked up the book, we are talking peaks and valleys here today. I'll be talking Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink next week, and we'll be looking to do one of these book discussions every single week. One of the goals after coming back from vacation is that I wanted to get back into reading. And in a lot of these cases, I'm going to reread stuff and be encouraging you to reread material. Most people out there have read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We are going to be reading that here within the next couple of months again to revisit it, because I haven't read it in 5 years. I know I've got life experience that I'll be able to bring to the table on this. But getting back into the story, you want to be able to appreciate each and every moment that you have. All right, that's that great place that we all want to be, where we can appreciate those moments. The down times, you're going to learn. The great times, you're going to still learn, because that's what's going to carry you to higher peaks. But you're going to be able to appreciate and acknowledge everything that you're going through, knowing that, again, if you're in that downturn, you will come out of it eventually. Even if you take very little action, you will likely come out of it at some point. So peaks, they kind of try to summarize this up here just a little bit, and it's a call out on the page here. I see it. So some of these call outs, I put all of them in here, and some of them don't resonate with me as much, quite frankly. But peaks are moments when you appreciate what you have. Valleys are moments when you long for what is missing. And so I guess actually I'm coming up with a new perspective with it right now, right here. Peaks are those moments when you appreciate what you have. That doesn't require you to be at a peak on the outside. And valleys are moments when you long for what is missing. So again, going back to this story, the young man finally gets to his peak, and he is longing for what is missing. He missed the sunset from the peak. He wanted to see the sunset. That was his goal, his side goal. Getting to the peak was the main goal. His side goal was that. So he is longing for what is missing, that sunset. Therefore, he's created a valley for himself. You can look for those things and have gratitude and appreciate things in the low moments that turn valleys into peaks. All right, that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. So if you want to have fewer valleys, avoid comparisons. That's one of those ways of finding out what is missing in your life, is to start comparing with other individuals. If you enjoy what's good about the moment, you feel more like you are on a peak. So kind of reiterating what I was just saying. Skip that call out. Choosing a better belief usually leads you to a much better result. And so that's one of the powerful things when you start reading books like this, where they're motivational and they're trying to change your perspective. What they're doing is they're creating a different belief structure. And that flips your perspective just a little bit. And what it does is it gets you in a more positive frame of mind. And when you're in a positive frame of mind, you're more confident. And when you're more confident, you're more likely to take action. And when you're more likely to take action, you're more likely to get the benefits of those actions, which eventually leads to success. Whew! All right, talked really fast through that one. But talking through your belief structure, I believe that if I'm in this valley, there is some good that is around. I need to identify the good that is housed within that bad. And that's going to be a tool, that's a handhold for me to climb my way out of it. And that's what you kind of want to look at. And it says here, the next call out is the path out of the valley appears when you choose to see things differently. So you have that stinking thinking of, you know what, I'm not worthy, I deserve to not be promoted, clearly there's something wrong with me. You have to flip that belief structure, and when you flip that belief structure, the path out often, exposes itself to you. So first, get in touch with where your value is. Get in touch with what your goals are. Get in touch with how your skills match up with those goals. And what you'll find is you start creating a path out of that valley. So Old Man goes on and says, many people don't realize that they need to be truly prepared if they want to stay on the peak longer. And it's an important aspect of things. A lot of people, I go through this with change management, when I talk through change management. One of the big problems is actually 50% of the changes that go into place, studies have shown that 50% of the changes that go into place meet their initial objectives. However, only 25% of changes are actually effective over the long term. Now, what that means is twice as many of those changes should be successful. But what happens is we get to the end, we get through all of our training on a new system, and that's it. There's no follow-up training. There's no follow-up discussions. There's no lessons learned conducted. There's no debrief on talking about best practices once everybody sees it. There's no plan for afterwards. And that's what they're getting at here, is a lot of people are so focused on the goal. And don't get me wrong, reaching any goal that you have takes an enormous amount of focus. But they're so focused on reaching their goal that they aren't thinking about how they're actually going to sustain themselves when they are there. So in the example here, it's the young man who didn't pack enough supplies to stay at the peak. He made it to his peak, but he didn't think about packing supplies to actually stay there. And so it's important that you work not just toward your goals, but how you can actually sustain those goals once you have them. At least give that a little bit of thought. I want to read Cindy's comment here. Turning the prism in order to view each situation in a different way will create a different result. What you're accustomed to is not necessarily what you want. And yeah, he gets into this just a little bit here when we start getting into plateaus in particular. That's my favorite little analogy that they have. When you find it using this hidden, yeah. So the next call out is, and it's on page 31, anybody who's following along with us here with Peaks and Valleys. You change your valley into a peak when you find and use the good that is hidden in the bad time. So this book was powerful to me because 7 or 8 years ago, I was going through a difficult time personally. And so this was one of the main things that I took away from it. And that is looking for the good that is housed in the bad. What about the situation that you find yourself in is an opportunity? Did you free up more time because you got fired, for instance? I'll use a really terrible example. So you can actually hit the gym while you're looking for a job because you're probably not going to be able to write resumes and do job applications all day long. There's not that many out there that you would want to take on. So what is the good that is housed within the bad? That gives you an opportunity to create that next handhold, that next step to get yourself out of the valley. A very important point. Next one, we're kind of moving along here. The young man is back in the valley now, and he's trying to discuss so many things with people, and it's not necessarily going well. Well, I take that back. In the story, he's actually doing very well, but then he starts down a bad road, and that is, it's reiterating. You can change your valley into a peak when you find out. Okay, never mind. I just called that was a call out there. I just underlined it because I happen to really like that particular message. So between peaks, there are always valleys. How you manage your valley determines how soon you reach your next peak. So the job that you have now, you might love it. But you know what? It doesn't hurt to look around from that personal peak that you're on and see if there is a higher peak out there. It's one of the things I encourage my coaching clients. Even if you're satisfied with your job right now, it doesn't mean that you're always going to be, and it doesn't mean there isn't actually something better that you never saw until you actually looked for it. So keep an eye out there, for the next peak and realize that there's going to be a valley. The valley can be a perfectly fine time, but a valley is a place where you struggle, where you're getting the skill sets that you need to move from a director position to a vice president position, where you move from line level to getting your first management and leadership position. There is a valley there between the success of being an hourly employee and obtaining a management position. That valley is where you learn, where you struggle, where you have those hard times, and where you might perhaps even feel insecure during those certain times. But realize that peaks are always separated by valleys. All right? If you do not learn in a valley, you can become bitter. If you truly learn something valuable, you can become better. And that's the goal of being in the valley, and the difference between those people that get stuck there for a long, long time and those that get themselves out of it right away. If you do not learn in a valley, you can become bitter. If you don't learn from wherever you're in right now, the situation that you found yourself in, if you don't learn what contributed to you being there, then you will become bitter. And that creates kind of a downward spiral for you that gets you stuck in that valley longer. But if you truly learn something valuable, you can become better. If you find yourself in a valley, and this ties in really good with next week's book, Extreme Ownership. If you find yourself in a valley, look for what you did that contributed to it. And it could simply be that there were outside factors, but you didn't recognize them. The signs were there. I've had that happen before, where I jettisoned a particular department in a particular company before things got really bad. And what I found is the people that I respected most within the organization that had huge talent, brilliant people, had already left. The exit door was kind of open at that point. I didn't recognize it as early as some, but some people didn't recognize it at all. And so take personal responsibility and try to look for those contributing factors. You're looking for places where you can learn something truly valuable when you're in that valley. And that shows the door to getting out of that valley. Now, going along and talking about a chapter on resting, and that is, the clarity he found on the peak was certainly different than the dullness he felt in the plateau. And that can be one of those things that gets you moving from the peak that you're on, is that sense of dullness, that sense of sameness that you have. You're not being challenged as much as anymore. You're finding yourself more comfortable. That's why I kind of highlighted that aspect of it, is you're usually clear, vibrant, energetic. You're seeing a lot of things because you're learning, you're on your peak, you're looking around. But when you're in that valley, your senses are dulled just a little bit. You don't have that energy. You're not bringing that passion to the position. And that can be an indicator to you that you need to look around for a new peak to climb. The plateau, and I love this, so I'll throw this up here. So this represents a heartbeat, peaks and valleys, all right? When they're discussing the plateau, he's talking about the straight line right here. That's when you're dead. And that's where you find so many people. They may not be bitter and angry and pissed off at their job or anything like that, but they're just kind of cruising and they're not really living. And that's why you say, they've got no peaks and valleys, they're dead. They're not truly living. You need to have those. That brings the appreciation of the good times. It brings more learning when you're going through the down times. So it isn't just that everybody goes through peaks and valleys. It's that you want to be going through peaks and valleys so that you can actually experience life, grow, and contribute more to everybody around you, all of your loved ones, all of your coworkers, all of your peers at work. So the kind of comment here is a plateau can be a time for you to rest, reflect, and renew. It doesn't mean, that you're always going through those peaks and valleys. You have these times where it's almost like a plateau. That's where you reflect. And that's where you decide which peak that you're going to climb, or which valley looks like it's going to teach you the most, that intrigues you the most, to see what's on the other side of it. So going through those times and having those times of rest, again, just came back from a vacation. So having a vacation gives you a chance to rest, recuperate, reflect, and bring new energy. And usually there's some insight that comes from it as well. kind of an overall reflection as we're going through this, and that is you become more peaceful once you realize that you are not your peaks, your good times, and you are not your valleys, your bad times. What happens to you? Those external events are not what define you as a person. They shouldn't be what defines you as a person. You have that value. You have an enormous amount of untapped potential. It gets into, the soft, weepy side of this book. You've got a ton of potential out there. And those external events don't define you. Because when you find yourself on those peaks and you've had that definition of success, what happens when you fall off of that? What happens when the industry changes? Recording artists, what happens when, they have that one-hit album and they don't have another great album? Are they no longer a great musician? No. Usually, in most cases, the musician, if they stayed true to their music, had that moment where everybody else all of a sudden liked that particular sound. And then that went by the wayside as people's tastes change. And so they had their moment, but it didn't define them as a musician. Similarly, as a worker, doing what is right, making the best call with the information you have to reach the goals of the organization, to balance everybody's interests, doing that on a regular basis does not always pay off with success. Sorry to tell you, it doesn't. A lot of times they backfires for any number of different reasons. But what I can tell you is if you keep making decisions in your career and your life in that way, in keeping with your principles, in keeping with goals, in keeping with everybody's interests, and making the best decisions that you can, it always pays off in the end. Maybe not immediately, but eventually it does. You can have, next call out in this, is that you can have fewer bad times when you appreciate and manage your good times wisely. All right? I'm going to say that again. You can have fewer bad times when you appreciate and manage your good times wisely. What you do when you are successful, what you do when you accomplish some goals, what you do when you reach something, some sort of peak, what you do in those instances determines how long you stay there and how few the bad times are down the road. Do you keep challenging yourself? Do you keep reinventing yourself when you reach success so that you can change? Going back to the recording artist example, the cliche is almost Madonna, who finally hasn't been able to reinvent herself, but there was a constant state of reinvention, and that's why she had a 20-year career. All right, look for what you can do when you reach success to stay there, and that'll minimize the downtimes that you have. Now, the most common reason you leave a peak too soon is arrogance, masquerading as confidence. All right, so this is, again, going to those industry examples of Kodak, for instance. Well, nobody's going to want digital cameras. That is arrogance masquerading as confidence. And that's why they fell off of their peak. The most common reason that you stay in a valley too long is fear masquerading as comfort. You'd be surprised what you can get comfortable, the situations and in environments that you can get comfortable in, or trick yourself into believing that you're comfortable. And one of the main things is that fear of the unknown. You won't necessarily know the whole plan to get out of your valley. We'll keep going with analogies. It's dark and you have a flashlight. You can't see all the way up. You can only see 20 feet in front of you. And there's fear of what is out there and making a mistake. And too many people use that fear as a reason for sticking in the situation that they're in. All of those co-workers of mine when I was an hourly employee that were griping about the job constantly but would never ever go look for a new job, that's what was happening. It was a fear of the unknown. It was a fear of rejection if they went for an interview. It was a fear of what might happen in a new job and that it might be just as bad as this particular job. So monitor your fear in those cases. Because it mentions fear can chase away the truth. So the truth is, a lot of people should move on from their positions. But the fear in moving on from this, fear of the unknown, keeps them away from that truth that they need to move on. Master Israel chains for lead. You can always lead Israel, I'll say, in any of these areas. in any area of study, you can be a leader in there. You just have to serve others. So the other thing is, when you put your ego aside, you are more likely to leave the valley sooner. Ego is what traps you in the valley. Ego is what makes it everybody else's problem. Everybody else was the reason that I'm stuck in this valley. It was everything that happened around me that caused me. It wasn't me that got me stuck in this valley. There wasn't anything I could do to prevent myself from getting stuck here. It was everybody else. And what that is that's ego playing with you. All right? I didn't do anything wrong. It's everybody else. I'm the one that is perfectly fine. It's everybody else that needs to change. That's crazy. As ego, arrogance, you can call it whatever you want. But when you also let that ego, the flip side of that ego is it keeps you in that valley. It traps you in that valley because you're not going to learn anything, because you don't have anything to learn because you've got this huge ego. But the flip side of it too is on the peak, ego is what leads to that arrogance. And it is that ego. Pride cometh before the fall. That ego is what creates you to be stagnant, to not see other opportunities, and to try to will the world to do what you want it to do, not to react to the way that the world wants you to work. It takes a remarkable person to truly appreciate and use what lies hidden in the valley. Do you think you can? And that's really kind of the question on here. Learn from those bad times. If you find yourself in tough times right now, learn from them. And I did want to call this out. Anybody who's tuned in here a little bit late, we're doing our first book discussion, Peaks and Valleys. It's a great discussion. If you haven't read the book, you can definitely tune in. I'm just reading excerpts from it and kind of applying it to leadership and your career a little bit, so throwing a little bit more color behind it, but it's a very quick read. So I encourage you to indeed tune in and read it afterwards. I hope I can inspire you to do that here a little bit. They talk here a little bit. So we talk about setting a vision, and that's what it starts talking about now when you want to get to the next peak, when you want to set a goal. So perhaps you have a very lofty goal. I love it. I love big, hairy, crazy goals. All right. What you want to do and what they talk about is getting clear on what that looks like to have that goal. All right. There's practical reasons it doesn't get into here. I do believe that the author was just kind of, I want to say, skipping over those just a little bit and letting kind of the lessons put together just a little bit. But when you create that vision, and they talk about using all 5 senses, all right, touch, taste, smell, hearing, sight. What does it look like when you reach that goal? You look around, you walk into your office, you walk into your new house, whatever it happens to be. What do you see there? What that does is that's motivation. And that's really what it's getting to. It helps you get through the tough times, because it's not easy to go from a valley all the way to the peak, to go from those bad times to great times. It's not easy. And so getting a clear vision of what you're working towards is something that's hugely beneficial for you from a motivation standpoint and can help see you through those dark times that you're going to face on your journey. So what is your end goal? And I guess that may be the first thing. What is it that you're striving for? If you are on a peak right now, if you have a crazy amount of success, what can make you more successful? What can keep you there? What does that look like to be in this state of success for a year, 2 years, something along those lines? What would that feel like? What would that do to your relationship? So get clear on those things. The other aspect of this that I think the author didn't really touch on, but was probably almost intending to, is when you get a clear vision, again, touch, taste, smell of what it looks like when you reach your goal, when you reach your peak in this case, you also have a clear understanding of what you're going to need to bring along with you in order to stay there. All right, we talk about those supplies. And so it's easier once you have that clear vision to be able to see what it is that I need to bring along with me. So the next chapter, in chapter 6, it's the discovering chapter. And it's a point that I recognized this last time that I was reading. Yes, and Liz, you should be able to get it in your local bookshop. You can also look on Amazon, of course, but it's a great read. You can listen to this session. We're going through a lot of the high points here. I'm covering a lot of it because I really think there's a lot of depth to this and a lot of application for people. So you can actually go back to the beginning of this and watch this thing the whole way through, and probably gain some pretty good insight into it, but it's still worth a read, and it's a quick read, so it doesn't hurt you at all. And that is that the journey from valley to peak is a harder journey than the young man expected. Both of them, when he goes to his first peak and then when he starts working towards his second peak, both of those journeys prove to be harder than expected. And I think that's something that we need to look at and be wary of, or be aware of, is that when we're reaching for our goals, it's going to be tough. It's going to be difficult a lot of times. And in many cases, we paint a rosy picture to get ourselves going. But just acknowledging, just like we go through peaks and valleys, but acknowledging that those times up are going to be really tough, or something that can help you actually get through that. One of the things that's mentioned in here is, talking about those tough times, is that the pain in a valley can wake you up to a truth that you have been ignoring. That fear of failure, and I guess the cult of failure, where people are really, hey, you want to fail fast. What they're addicted to in those cases is the truth that comes out of that failure. Because when you fail at something, that means you tried at something, and it usually reveals something. And that's what Spencer Johnson is getting at here, is in the valley, oftentimes those pain and difficult and big obstacles that you have to overcome to get through to the other side reveal something about what's going on in your life. And that can be something that you can carry with you to stay on those peaks longer. Another call out is, avoid believing things are better than they really are when you're on a peak, or worse than they really are when you're in a valley. Make reality your friend. And that's that old saying that things are never as good as we think they are, and they're never as bad as we think they are either. It's usually in some middle ground. That's where the reality is. And that plays into arrogance too, when you're on that peak and you're not changing because you think everything is great and everything is rosy. No, it's not. It's usually worse off than you expect. Likewise, when you're going through those really tough times, it's almost never as bad as it feels or as you think it is. So I love it. Just a very small sentence fragment, and that is, the difference is in the doing. And this, whether you're in a valley or you're in a peak, whether you're looking to maintain your success or whether you're willing to get past a failure, the difference is in the doing. What happens is that people dwell on their failures. They get stuck in that rut and they can't pull themselves out of it. A lot of us have seen this with loved ones or close friends or peers at work. They can't get themselves out of that doldrum because they're not doing anything. Likewise, you see people who are successful who are coasting. The difference between people who are successful, who stay on those peaks a long time, and stay in those valleys very little time, the difference is in the doing. So the young man, as he starts going through more and more peaks and valleys, is that he finds that he liked the possibility of making discoveries in the valley so that his next valley would be less painful, maybe even beneficial. Understanding that your life, your career is going to go through ups and downs. If you know that you can get some valuable insight when you have those down notes, then it can be something that you almost sickly, I'll say, look forward to. I know Gary Vaynerchuk's talked about this a lot, where he sincerely would almost wish that he could go back to where he was and start from scratch. He liked the process of learning those lessons. He's got a lot going on, a lot on his plate, and he's not going to head back there. But if it all fell apart tomorrow, there would be a big part of him that would smile, that he gets the chance to start over again, because there's an excitement in that learning and in the lessons that you can be taught in that struggle and in those valleys. And that's, I think, what he's really referencing there. But look for those opportunities when you can flip that, as I mentioned to one of my coaching clients, that crisis into an opportunity, then it becomes something that you almost look forward to. One of the big mistakes that people make, and it's called out here, is I was just trying to escape my valley, not learn from it. You're not going to get out of your valley by just trying to get out. You've got to get out of the valley by learning the lesson that you need to learn. Okay, that's what's going to get you out and keep you out. If you don't learn a lesson, you're going to just slip right back into it. And so don't just try to escape the bad times that you're in. Learn from them. You see this with drugs and alcohol when people are going through tough times. That's them just trying to get out of their valley by self-medicating themselves. All right? You want to learn something to truly get yourself out of the valley. And I think I just have a couple more here. So to stay on a peak longer, be humble and grateful. Do more of what got you there. Keep making things better. Do more for others. Save resources for your upcoming valleys. I'm going to say that again because it's a great kind of summary to this. And that is to stay on your personal peaks, to stay on your career peaks longer, to maintain that success. Be humble and grateful for what led you there. Do more of what got you there. Keep making things better. Do more for others. Save resources for your upcoming valley because you will at some point go through that valley. Peaks and valleys are opposites. And this is kind of getting into the hack. So if you want a hack, you're going through a tough time right now. All right? This is a great hack for you. Peaks and valleys are opposites. So he looked at what he did that put him in the valley, and then he did just the opposite. So what led to you being in the valley, career-wise, personally? Do the opposite. If you can really learn and discover what got you there in the first place, then the hack for it is just flipping that page and doing exactly what the opposite is. The last comment I have here, page 88, and I'll wrap up this discussion in regards to peaks and valleys, is that he looked at what was real, not at what he wished for or feared was real. That fear, that ambition on what we're missing out on, really cutting to the heart of the real situation, what got you there, what can keep you there. Those are those things that helps you manage those peaks and valleys better. So again, if you have not picked up this book, I know I've shown the spine of it a couple of times, 99 pages, about an hour and a half worth of reading here. It is well worth the time. I hope you'll go back and listen to this kind of book discussion that we had here. And next week, Friday, 12:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I'm going to be going over Extreme Ownership, one of the best books that's come out in the last couple of years, in my humble opinion, on leadership. And I'm looking to do these book discussions every week, Friday, preferably. I've got a little bit going on tomorrow, so I did this on Thursday. But generally, it's going to be Friday, 12:30, and I'll have the list of books up there somewhere. I'll post it somewhere up on Facebook so you can see and get prepared and read in, and that way you can kind of follow along in the discussion with me. But really, thanks for joining me. Love this book, and I love being able to talk about it with you. And if you have any other questions, any other concerns, anything that's going on, please drop down in the comment section. I'll be reviewing those comments, or you can always direct message me through Facebook or cm@cameronmorsey.com. Happy to help you out, happy to be of service, and I will talk to you all tomorrow on a more standard episode of Mentor Minutes where I'll field your questions. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.